All right, we're live. As usual, I'll wait a couple of minutes, let people have an opportunity to log in. And if you see me turning to my right, your left, I guess, it's because I'm looking at the screen. So I got the screen, I got a second screen so I can try and read the questions that people are asking. I already see that I got a couple of questions from a few folks, which is interesting. Sorry for the confusion. I had set this for 7 p.m. and as many of you know, in the last little bit, for the last couple of hours, YouTube appeared to have been down. So I rescheduled it, and then sure enough, Murphy's Law, as soon as I did that, YouTube came back up. So I decided to reschedule it. I have a busy week coming up. I have friends coming for a visit this weekend, so I really wanted to do this tonight. Zeb, good evening to you, my friend. All right, so first off, today is November 11th, so I think it's perfectly appropriate to mention that. We're not going to take a moment of silence. I hope all of you did that this afternoon. I did it while I was driving, but November 11th is an important date to remember around the world, especially at this time of COVID-19. You know, without getting too political, COVID-19 is we're stuck at home. We're worried about things. A crisis in the economy. We're worried about the health of people, older people, younger people, and it's uncomfortable. And it's been a disruption for people's lives for 6 or 7 months right now. But if you think about the disruption that the two great wars caused and other wars, I think we can get through this one. So personally, I posted some pictures today. In my family, we have a long tradition of military service. My great-grandfather served in World War I. My grandfather served in World War II. My father was in the Army. Anyways, let's get that done. So thanks to all the veterans today, and we remember the people who made this a great country. All right, so this video is called After the Hike. So most of you saw, hopefully watched, gave me some comments. Evan and I completed a pretty impressive hike back in August, September. We did a loop in Jasper called, that I'm calling the SOUTHESK Loop. So it's a piece of the South Boundary Trail. So give you a bit of history. The South Boundary Trail. So Jasper Parks, Alberta had a long history. People have been living in Alberta, and then in the early 1900s, the government decided to build a park. And building a park, designated an area as a park that you couldn't go into and couldn't hunt, was foreign to a lot of people. People living in the north had traveled through that part of the world all the time, and suddenly they couldn't go in there. And when the park was first built or designated as a protected area, there was a boundary, but nobody respected the boundary. The boundary meant nothing to old trappers in those days. So what ended up happening is the government of Canada built cabins all along the boundary, the border of all of Jasper. Actually, there's cabins all over the national parks, but along the boundary of Jasper in particular, there were cabins built about every 20 miles, and those trails became known as the South Boundary Trail and the North Boundary Trail. So Evan and I were basically on the South Boundary Trail, and we did a loop inside that, and we went to visit the seldom visited SOUTHESK Lake and a place called Glacier Lake, which was absolutely fantastic. So a couple of questions I got from the videos. The first thing I want to do is I want to apologize to everybody, but I apologize with a grain of salt. The sound was not up to my standard, and neither was the quality of the video. But in the end, it is what it is. Over the years, I've had lots of people tell me, maybe I should upgrade my equipment for my camera equipment, my sound equipment. That all sounds fine, and it's all good on short trails. But I think the mishaps I had with the sound and the video emphasize the fact that we were in an extremely remote area. We're talking about being gone for 8 days with 35 pounds on our back and traveling 110 kilometers. So we were walking, 10, 15 kilometers every day, and we would leave camp at 10, and we would get to the next site at 6 or 7. And Evan commented, I saw Evan today, he said when he was looking at the videos, we look tired. We are tired. It is exhausting. You're getting rained on, you're looking for the trail, you're bushwhacking, you're stressed somewhat because in the back of your mind, if something happens, you can get in real trouble. And during that time, just finding the time to film becomes an issue. I noticed coming back home that I don't have a lot of footage because, quite honestly, when you're spending the time on the trail, you have a focus, you have a strong focus, and you're not always focused on filming. And then the other reality, so it's tough enough to capture the moment and remember to capture the moment, and then there's the gear. So I'm bringing so because I didn't capture a lot of the moment, I wanted to use Evan's footage as well. So between Evan and I, we had 4 cameras. So we had 2 GoPros and 2 cell phones. And they're all different vintage. And the software that I used had a hard time picking the right codec to make everything right. Anyways, I don't want to make a ton of excuses, but I also want to talk about the gear. You know, the gear gets abused. So one of my cameras, the GoPro, had a waterproof, it was in a waterproof case, which muffled the sound. So it is what it is. I hope you still appreciate the video for what it is, for the adventure that we did. And I think the fact that it's scratchy and not up to my standard for sound and stuff like that emphasizes the fact that filming on an adventure like this is more complicated than it sounds. And I'm not going to bring a $10,000 camera. I've said that all along because everything gets destroyed. So that's what it is. Now, the second most common question I got on this one, and I think it's more addressed to Evan, but I'll talk about it in general, is people were, you know, I said in an earlier live stream that Evan had set himself a goal of doing a long hike, which we did, but he had set himself an extra goal of doing some gourmet cooking. So he perfected his technique on gourmet meals, but he wanted to cook 8 meals on an 8-day trip. And when he first proposed that several months ago, I thought, you're out of your mind. So I said, you know, I thought we'll be lucky if we do 4, because I kept thinking of the weight. But Evan got the weight down so perfectly that we were able to have 8 gourmet meals out there. And so the question that comes up is, how do we preserve that food? Well, Evan's got a backlog of videos. So for every day and every gourmet meal we made out there, Evan will make a video and he will post his videos. Evan posts about once a week and every Friday. So he posted the first video related to this trip last week, and he's going to post another one. And then what I will do is I'll go back in the video and I put cards to his recipes. But basically, on a normal trip where we're doing 2, 3, 4 days of adventure, I plan on about 2 pounds of food per day. On a very short trip, I can jack that up to about 2.5 pounds. On a trip like this, fair to say we were down to about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds a day. So for 8 days, you're bringing 16 pounds of food. Now, we're not starving, but we're eating a little bit less calories than we should. We're eating under 2,000 calories. It's a bit of a sacrifice that we have to do. I mean, if you could see, you've seen me. I'm not skinny. I'm not suffering. I can go a few days without, eating my maximum number of calories. But for the most part, about 70% of the recipes that Evan made were dehydrated foods. So he brought dehydrated vegetables, dehydrated potatoes. He figured out ways to dehydrate beef and things like that, pasta. But 30 to 40% of what he brought is fresh food. So we brought onions, peppers. Those things keep forever. He brought duck. Now, it's cold in the mountains. It's 5-10 degrees during the day, maybe a little bit warmer, but it gets quite chilly at night. So food will actually preserve a long time. And what we do is you just make sure that your food is properly wrapped in a bag and it's stuffed inside your pack, and it stays incredibly cool. So you'll see in his videos what he brought out there. And then, of course, he brought a few things that were canned. We had escargots on the last day. So he brought a can of escargots. And trust me, folks, we hike out all the garbage. So we brought out the cans and everything else. But it's also important to we get a lot of questions regarding food. And the reality is, as modern human beings, we're accustomed to that best before date that's on things. That's just there for absolute safety. The reality is, as human beings, you can eat milk that's a little bit past due. You can eat meat that's a little past due, cheese that's a little past due, eggs, all sorts of things like that. It's not going to kill you. And the other thing is, some of the people have forgotten that some foods, humans have figured out a way to preserve food. So dehydrating vegetables, sausages, cheeses, those are all ways that humans have evolved over the centuries to preserving food. So we ate extremely well. Wait till you see, I purposely did not show all the food prep and the cooking in my videos. I left that up to Evan. And when you see what we were eating and the preparation for his meals, it was absolutely amazing. I mean, let me recap. We had fajitas, we had duck pad thai, we had a salmon and warm potato salad that was incredible. We had a pasta at SOUTHESK. We had crab cakes at Glacier Lake. We had shepherd's pie that was so amazing at on day 6, and then back on day 7 he topped it off with the escargots and then a couple of desserts along the way. So I'm just going to turn now and see what kind of questions people are asking me. Are you still liking your tent? I asked because I'm thinking of getting a one-person tent. I've had a couple of questions on the tent, and yes, you know what? I love my tent. I've done a couple of reviews. So my tent, just to recap, is a Marmot one person. It's the tungsten. It's the UL version. The difference between the UL and the non-UL is a couple of ounces, 200-300 grams. They get to UL by really putting a lot of mesh in it. And the tent is narrow. It's not much wider than a pad, and I'm only 5'8", so I have my full length. Perhaps if you're a 6', 6'2", 6'3", it might not be that good, but the tent weighs about 2.5 pounds. It's super easy to set up. And it has a small awning in front, a small vestibule, not very huge, but you can store gear. I've hiked in it with Tika and it's fine. It's extremely waterproof, and I like the fact that it's polyester, so it's still it's not that silicone nylon which holds up a lot of water. And that's another I talked about this in other videos. Don't buy gear just on its dry weight. Make sure you understand that, where we hike most of the time, we're wet almost 35 to 50% of the time. So gear is seldom completely dry. So looking at purely the dry weight of something is not correct. You have to look at the wet weight. Good job on the loop. Looks like quite the adventure. It was actually, that's 2 questions from Zeb. I got to pick up somebody else's question. Oh, no, sorry, Zeb. That's your first question. And by the way, the reason, so the loop that we did, seldom visited, barely a trail, and we confirmed by reading the logs at one of the cabins that only Parks Canada staff had been on that loop this year. The reason I want to promote this loop, and I've been promoting a lot of loops and a lot of trails in the parks, is hiking is popular, it's getting crowded, and in my opinion, the more we spread out and discover more trails, the more solitude we'll have, the more opportunities we'll have. I don't know if that's quite clear, but I hope some of you guys will go and visit, and gals will go visit this loop in the coming years, and maybe it'll give the park a little motivation to go clear it. And even if they don't go clear it, if more of us go on the trail, it'll clear itself naturally. So the trail, in terms of its physicality, you can see it on the ground, but the willows are overgrown. It's the willows that I have to emphasize. The willows were, taller than a man. And I mean, there were days where we would come, I was looking forward to going into the forest, because in the forest, there was not a lot of ground cover. And then suddenly we would come out of the forest and into a meadow, and the meadow was like tall willows. And I'd turn to Evan and go, God, are you kidding me? Another mile of willows. And when you're in the willows, you don't see a head. You don't see if there's a bear. You don't see if there's a stump on the ground or a hole or something. And it's tricky walking in the willows, and you're getting scratched and whacked. So that would be the best thing that could happen to that trail, is if a lot of people start discovering it, the willows will get broken off and the trail will become more findable. And if somebody's interested, seriously interested in it, send me a direct message. My email, it's easy to find on YouTube, or put a comment and I'll send you the track if you want the track. What fishing rod did I use? Stephen, I'll talk. I'm going to do a little video on the fishing rod. Actually, I wonder if I have it here. No, I don't have it right in here, but my fishing rod looks like a pen. It's about, and it was given to me by Eric Coleman last year. He used it. He had great success with his fishing rod. And then when he left here to go back to California, you know, he cleaned we had a guest room, and Karen went up into the guest room to clean it up a little bit. And Eric, God bless his soul, had left the fishing rod, the little reel, and a windscreen, and a few things that I'd taken a keen eye to. I'd asked him a lot of questions about his fishing rod, so he left it for me. So the fishing rod looks like a pen. You know, it's the size of a Sharpie, and you take it apart and stretch it and attach the reel to it. The only trick with it is you can't cast it very far. So when you're casting with little MEPs or little spinners, you need to put a weight, but you can get it pretty good. But my goal is to go back into this part of the world in the coming years with the pack raft and maybe float the Rocky River. But the fishing rod worked like a charm. You never hike with poles. How do you protect your knees and toes on downhill? Actually, I do hike with a pole. I just hike with one. And the pole that I use has my camera mounted on it. But and in winter I bring two poles. But otherwise, going downhill, I use the one pole, and I manage well. Now, never underestimate, if you seriously need a pole and you don't have one, you can always cut one. And so and I'm about to do a video on poles. It's a subject I've never talked about, but I'm working on a video on poles, and I'll talk about poles. But no, I bring one pole. What decision would you make or think you'd do differently as advice for people looking to hike the same route? Great question, Jeff. Don't go over Dean Pass. So when we did the route, you could follow the trail, but we decided to go over something called Dean Pass. We had seen, I'd seen a vlog that was 2-3 years older where somebody had gone through and gone over Dean Pass, and somebody talked about the fact that there was something called Dean Pass, and it looked like it might be a shortcut, and it turned out not to be. It was one of the worst bushwhacking experiences ever. So don't go over Dean Pass. Otherwise, give yourself an extra day. We did it in 7. I'd suggest doing it in 8. And you know, the campgrounds we stayed at, SOUTHESK, is absolutely phenomenal. The one where we stayed at Glacier Lake, we needed to stay at Glacier Lake, but there's a few places past Glacier Lake and before Glacier Lake. That pass is so amazing. I don't think I'd go to Glacier Lake. Sorry, I'd go to Glacier Lake, but I don't think I'd camp there. All right, who else has a question? Hey, Nick. You gotta try Frog Lake. All right, somebody type me, or how did you plan this hike? Evan. I plan my hikes generally the same way. So Evan's being a bit sorry, or I don't know what the word is. He helped plan. We planned the hike together. My favorite way of planning hikes is looking at maps. I love maps, and I have a whole collection of maps. And I had this hike was on my bucket list for a long time. Maybe you saw a video that I posted just a couple of days ago. I have this big giant map of Jasper, and every time I finished a hike in Jasper, I would highlight it in purple or in pink. And there was only one hike that I'd never done, which is SOUTHESK. So I knew about SOUTHESK. So aside from finding the hike and deciding which hike to do, the planning is simply doing an itinerary. So before we set out, we knew where we were going to go, and we had an idea of the campsites. Some of the campsites are designated, some are not, and I want to tell a story about that. So laying out the number of kilometers we're going to travel each day, estimating where the campsites are going to be, and then beyond that is just planning your food. Now, I want to talk about you know, for this trip on day 6, so after Glacier at the junction of Restless Creek and Rocky Pass, we had a beautiful camp there. But that was a long day heading to Restless Pass. And near the end of that long day, you know, we did 18, 19 kilometer, and Evan was, you know, saying, you know, where's the camp? And I remember having to remind him, I didn't want to disappoint him, but so I had to remind him gently that there is no campsite, and there might not be a campsite. Our destination that day was just me looking at the map and putting a spot where I thought there would be a logical place to camp, which was the junction of the Rocky River and Restless Creek. Luckily, when we got to that junction, there was a beautiful spot. Now, we made one weird, interesting mistake. We were so exhausted by the time we got there that we just set up camp. And then we sat on the shores of that river and we had dinner and everything was fantastic. And then late in the night, we looked at the river and each other was like, maybe we should have crossed the river tonight, because we were soaking wet all day. And we got to the camp, and while we were already soaking wet, we should have just crossed the river and made a camp on the other side of the river, but we didn't. So then the next morning when we woke up, the first thing we had to do was cross the river. And that made me think of a game changer, which Jeff is mentioning right now in the emails. Wandering Panda, Jeff, came to our house and gave us each a pair of waterproof socks. And I will do a quick review of those in the coming weeks. But I thought, I've often said nothing's waterproof. Those socks were absolutely waterproof. And if you and what they are is a combination of a merino wool and a neoprene, and they're so watertight that if you inflate them, you can inflate them like a bubble, so they hold air, so you know they're watertight. And the secret to those socks is you put them on and make sure the water doesn't go, that you don't go across water higher than the top of the socks. Now, unfortunately, we were getting wet because we were crossing creeks that had water up to our thighs. And by the end of that day, we were not we weren't getting into our water shoes. We were just crossing in boots. Just received my 1P yesterday, Cody. It is incredibly light and seems okay. Do you do anything special to keep your boots from getting wet with sweat on the inside during winter? JT. The secret to keeping your socks, no, you can't stop sweating. You just can't. You can't stop sweating in your socks, your feet, your jacket. The secret in winter is to absolutely have a dry change of clothes and a dry change of socks. Jeff talks about those socks for JT. Okay. Your balloon animal socks. Yeah, thanks, Daryl. Video got me back into hiking. You're welcome. I'm just going to scroll up, see if I can read a couple of older questions here. Not a lot of questions. Hey, Marty, you mentioned in some of your vids before coming to Cali, backpacking either Ansel Adam, anywhere in the States. Yes, I've said it before. I mean, this was supposed to be the summer that I went into the States. So I took a year sabbatical. So I left my job back in October last year. So it's now been an entire year. And what I was hoping to do is I had a trip planned to South America in March, and then I was going to spend June, July, August visiting the US. I had some plans to go to California, Utah, Colorado, all the way down to New Mexico. COVID-19 put a complete end to that. So we'll see how work goes. I have an opportunity to go back to work for the next few months. I might go back and work for 6 months and then have another hiking season next year. But yeah, I'd love to go to California and Colorado and all those, and Utah. So I'd love to. And next year we're going to do a contest again like we did this year. I know JT's online and Jeff, so you folks saw Evan and I hosted a contest. People sent in some videos. JT, Jeff, myself, and Evan, we went to Landslide and Lake of the Falls, and we're going to do the contest again next year. And then I want to do some collaboration. Hopefully, maybe somebody invites us to the US and we can go do a hike in the US. How did you manage to pack everything into a 45-liter bag? Very, 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 very carefully. And the 45-liter bag does two things. It's very light, but it does force you to be extremely efficient. And so on the beginning of the trip, there was a few things over the top, on the outside of the bag. So the tent was on the outside of the bag, my rain jacket and a few things like that. But as the trip progresses and you eat your food, you notice it becomes noticeable that your bag becomes smaller. But I'm going to be honest here. I've talked on the trail lately. 46 liters is perhaps a little bit too small for 8 to 10 day trip. I've done two. I did a 6 day and an 8 day with that pack, and it's really pushing the limits. If I can get the same kind of pack in a 60 liter, that'd be fantastic. Quand le prochain voyage en français? Une question que Christian me demande. Fait qu'il y en a qui le savent. Je ne sais pas s'il y a des francophones qui m'écoutent présentement, mais moi, ma langue natale, c'est le français, donc je parle français. J'ai des amis français, puis à date, j'ai fait 2 vidéos en français. Ils sont pas si populaires que ça parce que mon audience, c'est une audience anglaise, donc je vais plutôt continuer de faire des vidéos en anglais, mais je voulais juste vous dire que je vais peut-être en faire un autre en français. There you go, just showing off my French. We'd love to have you down here in Cali. Well, we'll keep that in mind. You talk about retiring in previous videos. Are you training Evan to carry on your legacy? Question from Evan. I don't think you can fill my shoes, Evan, just like I can't fill your shoes. All right. Canoe camping trip in northern Alberta. Yes, no, yes. Okay, how long we've been doing this? About half an hour. So let's start thinking about wrapping it up. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was epic. The trip was epic. I encourage people to go do that trip in the coming years. Don't think you saw my question. Okay, Cody, how many tent stakes do you carry for the one person? 10. I carry 10 stakes. I get away with, you can get away with 8 or 7. I carry 10. I often use only about 8. And actually, you could get away with 6 because the one problem with that 1P tent is it's got a very high profile and the wind will knock it down. So when I'm setting it up, I set up the tent first with 4 stakes, and then after that I put the fly, and then I tie down the fly. But you could use 4 and then tie down the fly, and then remove the ones that are holding the tent down and hold everything down with just the fly. So if you just hold the tent down with the fly, you need 6 and you'll be fine. Which I often bring, 7 or 8. What is your favorite day hike in Banff? I've answered that question. Day hike? I'm not a day hiker. I'm just not a day hiker, so I don't do a lot of good day hikes. Steaks or steaks? Yeah, I do both. Great Q&A, Marty. Thank you. All right, guys. So we're gonna end it here, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks as always for the questions, watching the videos, supporting me over this time. And if I miss one of your questions tonight, just put it in the comments below and I'll try and answer it. And otherwise, if you like these live streams, I'll gladly do a few more, especially in COVID. But actually, I'm toying with the idea of maybe doing a Zoom. So I know my sons are doing Zoom for university, so maybe I'll do a Zoom, and maybe we can have more people log in and be live, and then I'll be able to flip between people and make it really interactive. I think that'd be fantastic. Hiking podcast and a lot of cool stories to share. Yeah. Okay. Now the questions are coming in. You're making me want to stay, but I said, half an hour seems like a perfect amount of time. So thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great evening tonight, and we'll see you off the beaten path. Cheers.